Welcome to the Polygamer podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
Hello and welcome to Polygamer episode number 86 for Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. I'm your host, Ken Gagney. A few months ago, I went to the Different Games Conference at WPI. This is an annual convention about the academic and diverse applications for video games. We've already had one guest on this show from that event, and now we have another. Welcome today, Yves Leblanc.
Hi!
It's such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, we got to chat a little bit after your Different Games panel, which I believe was called Being Human. Is that correct?
Yes, that was it.
And how did you get connected with that event? Did you already know Cara Stone, the moderator, who's also been on the show?
I was aware of Cara. I've been following her on Twitter for a while, but we didn't know each other. I became aware of Different Games Conference probably a couple of years ago. There are a few people here in Montreal that have been to the conference a few times since then, so I was aware that it was a thing. I guess it just ended up being in my circles on Twitter when they put up the call for applications.
Awesome. I'm glad that worked out. And you were at that panel talking primarily about your role as a community manager and QA tester at Clever Endeavour Games. So tell me, what is Clever Endeavour Games?
Clever Endeavour is an independent game studio. It was co-founded, if I'm not mistaken, in late 2014 by the three co-founders, Richard Atlas, Kyler Kelly-Tan, and Alex Attar. And we're now a team of 6. So the team has grown, but not that much. We're based in Montreal. We're in the fantastic gameplay space, which is a not-for-profit co-working space, especially for indies and games here in Montreal. And yeah, the company's just always been in that location. We've been staying there. I've joined the team, it was last year in May. And we make a game called Ultimate Chicken Horse.
What is Ultimate Chicken Horse? With a name like that, I imagine it must be amazing.
Yes. So what is usually the first reaction when people hear the name? To put it simply, it's build your own multiplayer party platformer. The game basically unfolds in 2 steps that repeat. The first step is that you pick objects that are platforms and or hazards, and then you put them on a grid to make a platformer level. There's a point A, point B. Everyone wants to get to point B. So after you've played something, you get the chance to run through the course. And basically the goal is that you want to be able to make it to the end, but you want it to be hard enough that not everyone is going to make it to the end. It is kind of, platformer level design, the game, and it can get pretty hectic.
Would you call it cooperative or competitive?
So it really depends how you see it. Mechanically, so the players are not interacting with one another. So everyone is building the same course. Everyone is running through the same course, starting from the same point. But, it's there is a scoreboard. You are trying to be the ultimate animal who gets the most points. So it is competitive in scoring, and I guess in the dynamics that will, of course, evolve between people as they are playing together and running through the course. But yeah, mechanically, you can think of it as cooperative, which is interesting.
And is there online play or online sharing of levels?
Yes, so there is both of those. There is online multiplayer where you can make a lobby, you can share it with exclusively friends or with anyone out there, and you can so there is a level editor where you can actually just be in the build phase and then be able to choose from any object. You can create a level that you can then share on the server, and you can make it either a level for party games, so the kind of play that I described earlier, or you can make a specifically challenge level where other players will get into it and not place anything, just try to run through it as fast as possible.
So with all these online components as well as social media, what constitutes your role as community manager?
It's a lot of tending to, all of that content that people are creating, making sure that the community has all of the tools that they need to be able to create those things and to share them with us and with each other. There's also a healthy amount of what I do that is to monitor all that everyone is saying about the game, what they like, what their grievances might be, and then communicate that back to the dev team to make sure that the community is heard and that we make things that make them happy.
And where do all those interactions occur? Because there's so much to social media nowadays. There's Twitter, Facebook, Steam, Discord, etc. How many different places are you?
So we're pretty much everywhere. We have a Discord server, we have, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we have a subreddit. But I would say definitely, so our most active platforms are, so first of all, Discord. That's where our most engaged and active members are hanging out basically every day. They're there to talk about the game, they create content related to the game, they match up if they want to play with people that they are more familiar with. Sometimes they get together to build levels together. We have a few people who organize friendly tournaments, which is really cool. So that part of the community is definitely the one that I get to be closest to because they are extremely prolific and just generally active. And I would say the other platform where we see a lot of activity is Twitter. So that's the, more general community, I would say. We're going to talk with all sorts of players there, whether they engage directly with us or because, we have tools to allow them to share levels and to share, screen captures from the Switch and to share also clips from their play on the Switch. I see a lot of stuff passing by where we end up being tagged and, I react to that. And I would say really Twitter people tend to engage in a very lighthearted way. The people who do come up and interact directly with us usually do it because they're familiar with Clever Endeavour Games and Ultimate Chicken Horse through an influencer that they follow. Really, at this point, I consider the audience of some of our most, loyal and returning influencers. So, for example, the, Achievement Hunter Gang and the Northern Lion Live Super Show, their audiences kind of end up being our extended community. They will respond and engage a lot whenever we talk to the influencers that they follow. And they are the ones who generate most of the memes and the inside jokes. These are the people that I will most interact with directly on Twitter.
Do you have a separate marketing person whose responsibility it is to establish those relationships with the influencers, or are you doing that as well?
That's pretty much me. So when you're a team of 6, you kind of have to wear many hats. And
Sure.
That is one of those that I wear. So, of course, there were existing relationships with streamers before I came along last year. But really now I get to actually dedicate proper time to taking care of those relationships.
So how do you identify which influencers to reach out to? Because there are so many people who are streaming on Twitch and YouTube nowadays.
So I would say right now I have it kind of easy because the game came out on Steam almost 3 years ago now. There have been people who have kept returning to the game when there have been updates. So those are definitely the people that are a no-brainer. You go talk to them because they're already so into the game and having fun with their friends with it. When it comes to trying to just broaden the spectrum of people, not only the influencers who play the game, but the influencers who play the game that we manage to be aware of, because there's just so much going on that it's hard to know where to put your attention. We have done a Twitch bounty at the end of September last year, because we were curious about that, we were curious to see who was going to pick up the bounty and if we were going to discover new communities who would be really into Ultimate Chicken Horse. I would say that basically, my feeling is that influencers who tend to, so people who are variety streamers, we don't have a streamer who is 100% dedicated to Ultimate Chicken Horse.
That'd be amazing.
That would be incredibly awesome. But we can't really try to convert someone to being that. So it's usually variety streamers, and definitely mostly streamers who have other streamer friends who they will play and stream together.
Just briefly, what is a Twitch bounty?
Twitch bounties are something that Twitch introduced at some point last year, where a game developer can make an arrangement with Twitch where we give them a certain budget that they then redistribute by offering pieces of it to different streamers. Basically, how it functions is that they are going to target a few bigger streamers who are part of the bounty system, and kind of as a first attempt type thing, because the bigger streamers will not always take those bounties, even if I think they are approximately proportionally priced, so they will offer a certain amount per viewer, which is, I think, roughly the same from one streamer to another. But yeah, so bigger streamers might not want to take a bounty because there might be more expectations from their audiences to retain a certain brand, basically. The idea is that Twitch kind of offers it first to bigger streamers, and then depending on how many of them will take them, it basically trickles down. So the idea is to get a relatively large number of individual streamers to accept the bounty and then play the game. Usually the kind of agreement is like, okay, so they're going to play the game for 1 hour on the stream. It's of course it's a disclosed sponsored content type thing. The goal is just to have a number of streamers trying the game or playing it during a certain time frame. So usually a bounty is going to run for a week or two maximum, and just targeting a wide variety of streamers and communities. So it's, from anywhere from 20 concurrent viewers to maybe 500 would be the, usual target there. It's Twitch's way of trying to connect streamers to opportunities and to some extent to developers. It's the value proposition for the developers is that Twitch guarantees, a certain quality of streamers and of audiences that we don't have to kind of manually go and try to select for.
Cool. So you have all these tools at your disposal, all these platforms that we discussed, like Twitch and Discord and Twitter, etc. You also mentioned that you respond to and react to a lot of the content that people put up. And once upon a time in a previous life, I was a community moderator for an IT magazine where I was reading all the user-generated content and removing the stuff that was inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But it occurs to me that community management includes moderation, but is more than that. So how do you manage a community? How are you proactive as opposed to just responding to what the community does?
A lot of the proactiveness is really more in the efficiency of what I do. So my goal in general is to make sure that my day-to-day and everything that becomes a constant, I can streamline that as much as possible, so that if the community grows towards a platform, or there's a new branch of the community that appears overnight because some influencer picked up the game and liked it, that I am ready to put time aside to make space for them. I would say it's both about just trying to be efficient in general and just being extremely observant of what the community is trying to trend towards, and to be prepared also to just actively encourage when people in the community are coming up with new things that they want to do. So, for example, our tournament organizers, I try not to wait around and see what happens with that. I try to get in there as soon as possible, give them tools if I can find them, give them official backing from Clever Endeavour to do what they want to do.
So what are some successful promotions, events, or campaigns that you've run? What were you really excited about when you were going into it? You're saying this is going to be awesome, and when you were done, you were like, oh my god, that worked so well.
An easy one that comes to mind is just last night, I did a stream with Michael A.L. Fox, who is part of the NLSS, which is one of those groups of streamers who have been streaming the game for 3 years now, basically. Michael, over the years, I knew that group before Ultimate Chicken Horse was a thing. So Michael is, a friend of mine at this point. What we agreed to do yesterday is that for the past few months, we at Clever Endeavour have been working on new content that we're going to release hopefully in the next month. That content is pretty wild. So we're introducing a whole bunch of modifiers. So, changing gravity and introducing player collisions. Basically everything we could think of that we could just go mechanically change. That update has been a long, long time coming because, of course, when you start to play with all of the mechanics of the game, you're going to break a lot of stuff. We've come to this point where we're very close to sending everything to certification, but because we want to make sure that this content is actually ready for real life usage, so to speak, I decided to reach out to a few people, including Michael, to do basically kind of a closed beta or exclusive access stream with those new features that are coming to the game. I got to just hang around with him on his stream for an hour. We played the game together. I was able to give feedback as we were going through, give some insights as to what the heck was going on with all of this new material. It was really, really good because for me it was both a way to start introducing the public to those new features that are extremely wacky, that are going to change how some people play the game, basically. See how they also reacted to those features as a streaming audience. And also it was a way for me to really confirm practically that everything was working fine, that all the time and effort that we've been putting into this has led to it being an actual polished product that, someone who was completely inexperienced with it was able to have fun with. And, I got to talk a lot about all of the behind the scenes of, the things that I've made for this update and for the game in general. And I just really love doing that. So that was a really, really super exciting way of getting some eyeballs on this new stuff that's coming up from the game.
I mean, that sounds super exciting. You sound very passionate about Ultimate Chicken Horse, but you've also been doing community management in a lot of contexts for many years. What is it that you love about community management?
I think that things in general are best enjoyed when you get to share them with people. That's how I've always felt about basically anything that I've been interested in. And I also feel strongly that people are at their best when they share what they're passionate about. I love passionate people talking about what they love and being, openly sharing of it and welcoming of others in that passion. And I think that when you have that sort of dynamic going on, collectively people are insanely creative and imaginative and funny, and they can really elevate the things that they engage with. So it's really just something that I I love to be a part of, and I love to actively facilitate that kind of stuff to happen.
So would you say that sharing other people's passion is your passion?
Yeah, probably.
Wow, that's so meta.
I know, I know. I can be extremely meta.
So as I mentioned, you've moderated other communities before Clever Endeavors. What are some of the differences between those other communities, like a Twitch channels, for example, and one based on a specific game?
Right. So, for example, with Ultimate Chicken Horse, when you're doing community management for a game, you get to work with a a product that is to some extent finite. So people who are interested in the game, who can produce content with it, are going to flock to that and kind of stick around and create community content between themselves. And the emphasis is maybe more in basically sitting back and seeing what it is that they come up with, and then also, trying to find new people we haven't reached yet, but whose interests also align with that. So I did community management for a Twitch channel previously, and I would say the main difference in the experience is that if you have a community that is based on a Twitch stream or a YouTube show or whatever, the community is a lot more dependent on the continuous creation of content. And I would say maybe even more, they are communities that are very, very strongly based around ritual. So people want that dynamic where they can show up every week to the same Twitch show, or they can expect to have a new video coming out, every week or so. And those communities are really, really difficult to keep active and engaged when there is any lapse in that ritualistic process of creating content. I really, really love those kinds of communities that grow around a ritual of sharing periodical content that comes in, because they tend to get extremely tight knit. Usually you're going to see the same faces around, because it lines up with your time zone, and it becomes, I would say, a lot more about the people who are part of that community than it is about the product itself. They have a lot more latitude to evolve and change as a community. But when you are a community manager and you do not necessarily have the control over how many or how much content can be put out and how often, it is actually a lot easier to deal with something like a game. There is some amount of expectations of updates, or at the very least bug fixes, but it's still more understood that it is something that is complete. So there is a lot less expectations that I don't have control over.
And so even though a Twitch channel is constantly producing new content, Clever Endeavor is also producing new content for Ultimate Chicken Horse, such as the update that you just mentioned with all the modifiers, but more recently, also the release of the game on the Nintendo Switch this past September. How did you see that shaping the community? What happened when that version of the game came out?
The Switch release was a long time coming. So part of the dynamics that I saw in the community was just people being really, really glad that it was out on the Switch now. Part of our Switch community is definitely people who either have played the game on other platforms before or have been watching content from the game and were kind of waiting around for it to come out on the Switch because that's their console of choice. So there was a certain amount of, just confirmation and re-emboldening of existing fans. But then also, we've definitely been seeing more, more feedback on social media from people who have been playing with their friends or their family in a very impromptu, casual way. People who are discovering the game, or people who are starting to share the game with their friends and family. So that has been really cool, and it's that part is really more, for our own gratification almost, because they're not necessarily the people who are going to be otherwise active in in the Discord or whatever. Another part of the community that has definitely grown with the Switch release is the Japanese fans. So the Switch version is very, particularly popular in Japan. We have started seeing a lot more of our Japanese fans on Twitter. They will share a lot of their game captures, and it's not nearly as easy for me to engage with them because of the language barrier. But it is really, really exciting to see that happen. And there is a province in Japan that had an actual big Ultimate Chicken Horse tournament at some point, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's just really crazy. And, I'm still trying to figure out how we can be more a part of that. But at the same time, it is cool that, people in Japan are just having their fun with the game, and they're making their own events and communities around that. And it's a whole ecosystem that is going on and is healthy and is existing kind of independently of myself. That feels like really high praise.
Why is it that you think this game in general, and the Switch version in particular, is so popular in Japan?
If I think about the game itself, I try to find factors in the game itself. There's definitely the aspect of the visual style, which is, in line with the, cute, kawaii aesthetic that can be very popular in Japan. But I also know that there are a few pretty big Japanese influencers who have picked up the game. And there are people at Nintendo of Japan who must really like the game, because they have... So the Japanese Nintendo website looks super cool because they have a blog part of it. They have some recurring shows that they make. And one of them, which I think is called Indie World, it's, a couple of people who talk about and play indie games on the Switch. And they have picked up Ultimate Chicken Horse and made a couple of videos about it. And, that's on the Nintendo of Japan website, straight up. So that definitely helps with, being visible.
Wow, so it sounds like the game has been very well received in a variety of territories, and you get to engage with that community, but unfortunately and inevitably, there will be some detractors who are leaving negative comments. It's easy to say to most people on the internet, don't read the comments, but that is your job. So what do you do when you come across a negative comment?
So we had an uptick in negative comments around the time that we released on the Switch, because as we found out 2 days before release, I think, there was some issue with using some languages. Some localizations would tend to make the game crash more. And in fact, we had some comments about it, but we had, I had immediately gone to Twitter and made a post and pinned it to the top of our profile to say, okay, folks, the game is about to come out on the Switch, and here are some languages where you might be experiencing a very unpleasant amount of crashes. There was a relatively simple workaround that was to use the English version instead. But, it was still a point of frustration. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that we were aware, that we were working on it, that a patch was on its way. So the people who actually took the time to go up to our Twitter profile, very few of them actually came to us with angry messages because they had the answer staring them in the face. But what I did a lot around that release was to just track very closely the Twitter search for Ultimate Chicken Horse. So I would see everything that people were saying about the game without necessarily tagging us. And that is definitely where I saw the most frustration there. People were just kind of offhandedly venting about, crashes, about it not being a good port or, that kind of stuff. But the very, very interesting thing was that basically every single one of those that I went and replied to, which to them was, I guess, kind of out of nowhere because, they didn't tag Clever Endeavour. But because I took the time to tell them, yeah, we're aware of this, we're working on it, here's where you can find more information, a lot of those people actually ended up following the Twitter account and replying to my message with something with just a very, very nice tone, basically saying, oh, you're great devs, your game is amazing, I love it, I cannot wait for it to, work as well as was intended. So that is something that I always try to keep in mind when I see people being negative about the game, whether it is at us or just at the void, that they tend to be people who actually care and are just not necessarily thinking about the fact that, we're just 6 humans making this game. I would say that is enough to diffuse a lot of what I see happening that is negative.
Wow, that's really awesome. So it sounds like when they thought they were unmoderated or unviewed, they were okay with expressing these negative emotions. But once they saw that, oh, the people who matter and care are actually listening to me, they sort of put on their best behavior and also appreciated that they had your attention.
Yeah. And it's, of course, in an ideal world, you would want people to always think about, who they might be affecting when talking about a company or product or whatever. But I think it's just always going to be a reality that when, people vent, people are petty sometimes. That's just something that happens. And if I'm out there monitoring people who are just talking about Ultimate Chicken Horse or something else that I'm working on, I'm kind of the one who is out there looking for all of those things that people are saying. So I can't really let it get to me that people can be negative sometimes. It's part of human nature.
And part of human nature inevitably is that some people will refuse to be mollified and they won't be happy no matter how much attention they get. And I don't need specific examples of those scenarios, but I know from reading my own YouTube comments and my own reaction to them that it's very easy to focus on the negative. It's sort of a human defensive trait. So how do you maintain your mental health when you're exposing yourself to so much negativity?
The way I see it, there are kind of 2 broad situations. So on the one hand, there's just, people are being either negative about the game or just being a negative force in general. Those people usually, so like what I would describe as general ugliness going on. Basically what happens is that I will, always try to give the one reply where I explain things from our point of view as, patiently and openly as possible. And if then the ugliness continues, it's relatively easy for me to deal with that when I know that I basically hold the power to say, you know what, this is unwelcome. I do not have to accept this. So even, even when people get a little nasty, as long as I feel like I can intervene and move on, I feel, pretty at peace with it. Uh, it is, however, for sure a different thing when the comments are personal. That is definitely not something I would take with as much grace, I imagine, because in my opinion, it's actually no one's job to just sit there and take the abuse. I think it's a case, so if I had something that was more targeted at me, I would really focus on the fact that I don't have to justify putting an end to it. I'm pretty confident in my judgment when something is unwelcome in our community spaces, and if I am made to feel uncomfortable, then definitely that has crossed the line. And also, if it really comes to that, I might be the community manager, but I can always ask my team to, either step in or just check in on me and make sure that I have the resources that I need to take care of myself.
I imagine it's unusual for your audience to make it personal because I was talking to another streamer the other day, and he said that if he wants to play a game without being judged about how bad he is at it, he won't stream it because that way he can enjoy it without it being so personal. And I've found some of that in my own YouTube comments as well. With you, I would hope that the audience, the community, sees you as representing a brand as opposed to being an individual.
Yeah. And I mean, so we make vlogs where most of them are kind of a Q&A format. So we take questions that the community has sent us on various platforms. And, each time a couple of people on the team are going to pick questions and answer them. We put some content out there that is definitely more personal and, related to us as game devs, but also just, as people. But even then, I would say maybe because we tend to keep it mostly in line with Ultimate Chicken Horse and Clever Endeavour, and if we stray from it, we try to still keep a balance of always making it somehow about the company or the game. We haven't had a problem with people sending really targeted comments. And I think that to some extent, or, maybe it's just because we're still in that sweet spot when it comes to interacting as individuals with our community. People are kind of just interested in seeing how we are as people, and they don't expect us to be, none of us are streamers or vloggers. We're just game devs who sometimes make videos to make our fans happy. And I think there's some amount of, we don't put too much polish in those things. We don't try to be people that we're not. So it's always kind of, it's not bad quality, but it's also, it's not professional YouTube content. And we're always kind of silly about it. And we're probably a little awkward most of the time. And I think it's just part of the vibe of, oh yeah, this is really this is behind the scenes. Don't take this too seriously.
I think silly and awkward probably describes a lot of gamers, and they appreciate seeing that in your videos.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other challenges about community management is that the community exists beyond just the 9 to 5 working hours. And I believe that is something that you talked about at your different games panel. What hours do you work, and how do you maintain that divide between your work hours and the rest of your life?
Right. So I definitely cannot speak for every community manager. And I would say that maybe especially in community management in games, I've heard some tales of hours and practices I would not think to be healthy. Personally, so I work Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. like the rest of the team. I come into work every day. We work from the same space. While I am definitely more likely to have plans that relate to work on evenings and on weekends, it is understood and expected that I will make up for that time. I'm actually pretty actively discouraged from doing extra hours or not counting hours, even if it's just being around Twitter on the weekends. So I'm not perfect at it. I will usually keep an eye on things because I find it less stress inducing to just look at the state of things over the weekend and just see that nothing is exploding than to try and refrain from even thinking about it. But at the same time, I really try to hold myself accountable to, this is my day job and I need work-life balance. And if I try to be basically on all the times that the community is on, I would never, ever rest. This is definitely not easy and something that has required a lot of organization and just structure to try and make sure that I don't let myself slip into bad habits. But really, everything that I do at work and the general understanding with my team is for me to be able to have the same kind of work-life balance and hours as the rest of the team.
You mentioned that a lot of organization is necessary to maintain that balance. Are there any particular tools that you use to help you manage your communities?
Yes. Part of it is kind of simple in the sense that if I don't want to be going around from tab to tab every day, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram and back around, I just make sure to give myself a little bit of structure to kind of do it in a bunch and then just move on to some other task that I need to do. The way that I do that currently is I use Habitica, the habit keeping RPG thing, but really it's mostly just having a checklist. And when I arrive in the morning, I have my checklist on Habitica of the things that I need to look at during the day. So I'm going to do basically a round of going around. I'm going to go through my emails, go through the notifications on the various social media that we have. Once I'm done with one platform, I check it off, I close a tab, and I move on to something else. Some of them I'm going to come back over to during the day for another round. Sometimes I'm going to keep a tab open if, for example, we just posted a vlog on YouTube. We're going to get, comments incoming. It's always good to be quick to react on those. But yeah, in general, I just try to declutter my tabs, just kind of my mind space, so that I don't jump from one thing to the next all the time. A lot of that is, just streamlining and segregating what I do. So I use so for work, I use Google Chrome, and for my personal stuff, I use Firefox. So when I arrive at home, I'm just gonna not open Chrome. I open Firefox, and then all of my, personal logins are there. And I don't have to see my work logins. I need to actually go out of my way to do that. None of it is high technology in any way, but it's kind of 1,000 little things that I realize I've come to do.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I've never used Habitica, which is a gamification task manager, and I'm looking at the website now. There'll be a link to it in the show notes. Looks like a fascinating tool. I'm also wondering, do you use, when you say you have all these comments coming in via Twitter and YouTube, Is there any one app that aggregates them all, like Hootsuite or anything?
So I used to make bigger usage of Hootsuite. They have lost a few functionalities in the past few months. I don't remember if it was might have been actually Facebook and Instagram that became harder for me to monitor through Hootsuite. So mostly I've been using. So I have TweetDeck for Twitter. For the rest, I just have in-browser extensions that will pop me a tiny little notification up in the corner of my browser if something is new, so that I can give it a quick glance and see if it's active, but it's not visually as distracting. It's also not taking nearly as much space as an entire tab.
Oh, cool. That's good to know. I'll have to look into those tools. So we're coming up on 1 hour, and I want to shift gears a little bit. Your Twitter account says that you have some interest in addition to community management and gaming. You also list publishing, neuroscience, and sexology as some interests of yours. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those?
Sure. My road to becoming a community manager in games was not actually a path to anything in particular. I've done a bunch of stuff. I've kind of always gone where, life took me. So when I was in my late teens, I started working at a French textbook publishing company because my mom worked there and I was very good with the French language. So I started doing some editorial tasks, a little bit of help here and there. And over the next few years, I came back every summer and, started doing some project management for the publishing company. That is more something that I did than something that I was into. For me, that was really a job. But at the same time, it's definitely a privilege to have had my first foray into work to be as someone working in publishing. So that was definitely interesting and informative. What I was really interested in was biology and especially neuroscience. So I did a biology major at McGill University with a pretty strong focus on neuroscience and psychology. Throughout that major, I also I was interested in kind of individuality in general, and at the same time, that's when I became really interested in communities that were centered around gender and sexual identity and all of the discourse about that, and feminist thinking and queer thinking. Those were my Tumblr days. I was really, really super interested in that. And basically what happened is that at the end of my major in biology, I was looking for labs to be in neuroscience for a master's. And most of the thing that was going on here in Montreal was, studies with cells and genetics stuff. And that was really, really not what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to work with people. I happened to have started working with she does clinical work in sexology with people who have spinal cord injuries. So I got into that for the neuroscience aspect. It ended up aligning with my interest more around identity and gender and sexuality. And I decided to do a master's in sexology here in Montreal. I focused on the branch that they call research and intervention. I followed all of the classes that were more focused on the gender aspect of things. I was preparing to write a master's thesis on basically gender expression and some representations of gender. I did all the classes. I was prepared to start doing my research for my thesis. And I got really, really, really tired of the academic lifestyle. And at the same time, I was starting to be very, very engaged in some online communities around gaming, and I decided that I would try, getting a career in that. That's where I am now.
So, what is sexology?
So, sexology encompasses what you would describe elsewhere as gender studies. Then there's also sexual education. That's also what people who want to be sex therapists do, about the study of both from a more physiological, maybe sometimes even medical aspect of sexuality in humans, but also goes all the way to, for example, doing governmental research on whether a sex education program in schools is having the intended effect in what the kids are learning.
So what does one do with a degree in sexology?
So sexology as a profession, the title exists officially here in the province of Quebec. Other people are going to come into the domain from usually psychology, but it is very much something that, anyone who is working for health agencies that have to do with sexuality, and anyone who is a teacher, a sex educator, people who do social intervention. There's actually a lot of stuff that sexologists are doing.
And what about yourself personally? How does this interest manifest itself?
So I would say that currently this interest it's always informing. So because for me, it was really related to my general personal interest in the worlds of how people live their gender experience and their sexuality. It's something that I kind of always have on my mind, that this is a part of people, and this is something to be aware of when I'm moderating communities, making sure that everyone is feeling welcome and comfortable and everyone is respectful of one another. But I'm also super interested in games where you have representations of either a gender and or a sexuality. For now, mostly as a consumer perspective, but it's something that I could very much be tempted to explore in game making in the future myself.
That's awesome. You see yourself continuing to work in community management, and we didn't get to chat too much about this, but also QA testing?
Yes. Basically, I do pretty much 50-50 community management and QA, depending on where we are in the production cycle. And that's because the way that I see the QA aspect of my job really includes all of the, taking the feedback from the community and actually translating that in actionable things for the dev aspect of the game. Because we are a small studio, I have the privilege of, really being involved in the entire process, in every design conversation. And I am, for all intensive purposes, I am just a sixth of the studio. And as we move on to the next projects, I will have the same, liberty and power as everyone else on the team to explore certain themes and certain genres and ideas I might have in mind, and try to convince the team to work on it.
So you gave us a brief hint of what is coming for Ultimate Chicken Horse with an update with all the modifiers, but it sounds like the team is already working on their next project, which might not be Ultimate Chicken Horse related?
We have not started working on something in particular, but we have put everything in place to start the prototyping and experimentation and just learning phase. We're going to keep, offering technical support, but also some amount of content for Ultimate Chicken Horse. But we're definitely about to move on to something new. We're still at the point where, everyone has ideas that we have yet to put into interactable things and prototypes. So literally no one knows what it is exactly that we're going to be doing next. But we're really, really excited to find out.
Awesome. And I'm sure that listeners to this podcast are also interested. If they want to follow along with Clever Endeavour Games, where can they find you or the company or Ultimate Chicken Horse online?
You can find the Clever Endeavour website at ultimatechicken.horse. That is a domain. Or cleverendeavourgames.com. You can find the company on Twitter at clevendev.games. And you can find the Discord channel at discord.gg/UCH.
Awesome. And there'll be a link to all those in the show notes found at polygamer.net. Eve, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Polygamer, a Gamebits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.